In December of 1946, a Harvard freshman named Fernando Zobel de Ayala knocked at the door of 52 Walker Street Place in Cambridge, a modest two-family dwelling in a working-class neighborhood. His friend, Paul Haldeman, a Harvard graduate who Fernando had met in Manila at the close of the war, had insisted that Fernando visit his artist friends, Jim and Reed Pfeufers, and their 3 children, Joachim, Martha, and Eric.
If I'm not mistaken, I think I was 6 when I first met him. And through the eyes of a 6-year-old, it was all magic. When he introduced himself to us, he came in very formally, he clicked his feet together, bowed, and introduced himself. And then he came with presents.
The warm friendship that began that night would last nearly 4 decades until Zobel's death in 1984. The Pfeufers became a kind of second family for the young artist. Their support and nurturance became crucial to Zobel's development into one of the leading modern artists of his time.
My parents were obviously very important to Fernando. They bonded immediately when he first arrived, and it continued for more than 40 years.
In a letter written to Paul Haldeman in December of 1946, Zobel describes his reaction to Reed and her paintings. "I finally got together with the Pfeufers, and we had a most delightful evening viewing her paintings. I can well see why you make use of the rhapsodic tone. She has a most unusual depth of what I would call, for lack of a less worn phrase, poetic feeling. Her handling of color is likewise superb, though unconventional." For the next 4 years, until his graduation in 1949, Fernando was a regular visitor to the Pfeufers' home, where other young men, including Paul Haldeman and a group of young architects, were often present. Zobel took an interest in each of the Pfeuffer children. He painted a mural on Eric's wall, took Martha to a costume ball at Harvard's Hasty Pudding Club, and talked about painting with Joachim. He spoke Spanish with Jim and talked with Reed for many hours about his interest in the poet Lorca and, of course, about painting. After returning to Manila in the summer of 1949, he wrote to Paul Haldeman about his feelings towards Reed and Jim. "Give my best to Jim and Reed. I would like to thank them somehow for what they have been to me for these past 4 years, but I won't attempt it. I'll have to let it go rather than make myself completely foolish, and trust you at some appropriate moment to hint of how I feel." Reed's expressionistic paintings and her poetic, mysterious manner fascinated young Fernando Zobel. Reed Pfeuffer shaped both Zobel's early work and his ideas about art.
My mother's influence on Fernando, as far as I can understand, and I'm sure it's the case, was profound. I know they had very intense conversations about painting and studied painting together.
After earning his undergraduate degree in 1949, Fernando's friendship with the Pfeufers continued into the 1950s as he returned to Harvard to briefly study law and then to work as a curator at the Houghton Library. In the 3 years between his departure from Harvard in mid-1951 and his return to the United States 3 years later, Zobel was a busy man. He worked for the family business, Ayala Corporation, painted, and became an advocate for the cause of Philippine modern art. Zobel had his first one-man exhibition in Manila in 1953 at the Philippine Art Gallery. One of the paintings he exhibited there, Nothing 3, or Seated Man, was later exhibited in Boston and given to Jim and Reed as a gift. He wrote to Paul Haldeman in 1954, saying, "I cannot paint those careful, multi-textured things I used to do in emulation of Reed. I paint big, bright, simple, and flashy." In early 1954, before leaving Manila, Zobel published his sketchbooks, which contain sketches made between 1950 and 1953. In May, he gave the Pfeufers the first, last, and only Jim and Reed copy, complete with inscriptions and original paintings. Jim Pfeuffer, who appears as a dark, comical figure holding a clarinet in a 1953 Zobel portrait, was serving as the head of the graphic design department of the Rhode Island School of Design. In 1954, Jim invited Zobel to serve as a visiting instructor. During his stay in Rhode Island, Zobel saw an exhibition of Mark Rothko's paintings that changed the course of his art.
There was a show of Rothko, and Fernando, I just remember he was stunned by the use of color, their abstract paintings, and it totally turned him around.
6 months after seeing the Rothko show, Zobel wrote in his journal, "I am awed by the way those huge colored squares refuse to be forgotten." A few years later, Zobel exhibited his first sustained series of abstract works, the Saetas.
Fernando had the benefit, I would say, of my father's experience. He had started as a painter himself, and as time went by, he became more and more engaged in etching and of various kinds of medium.
During his years of living in Manila and then Spain, Zobel kept in constant touch with the Pfeufers by writing letters that he often decorated with sketches.
Every letter that he ever wrote is written with love. And I think we all felt that way about him. Yeah.
Zobel took an interest in the Pfeufers' older son, Joachim, who was both artistic and musical. He wrote to Reed and Jim from Manila, offering to pay for a trumpet for Joachim, who the family called Joe, and then included the trumpet in a painting of the window of the Pfeufers' new home in Providence, Rhode Island.
Well, my brother was a very intense and talented person in many ways, and Fernando saw that immediately. They had a relationship as painters.
Zobel's portrait of young Eric, created around 1953, is a 17 by 7 inch oil painting on masonite that shows the young man as a knight with a red t-shirt, holding a winged helmet. It is a charmed image of boyhood that shows the artist's respect and love for his young subject. That love and respect was mutual, as Eric remembers thinking of Zobel as a family member.
I was just taken in by this miraculous person who just came and arrived and then became so close with the family. So it was just a completely comfortable friendship. When I was with Fernando, it was just a joy of knowing him. And he was always generous and focused on his painting. He was very disciplined person.
In the early 1960s, both Eric and Joachim made extended visits to Spain, where they visited Zobel. Eric arrived just as the Museum of Abstract Spanish Art was in its early stages.
When I was there, living in Spain, was in the period when he had bought the buildings in Cuenca that he was then, at that time, was turning into the first Spanish abstract painting museum.
Reed and Jim also visited Cuenca in 1974, where they found Fernando warm and welcoming. During Fernando's last visit to the Pfeufers, a few years before his death, he stayed with them at their Cape Cod home and was pleased to sleep on the same red chaise lounge that he'd slept on in their Cambridge home more than 30 years before. In the past year, Eric Pfeuffer opened up the flat files from his parents' estate and found a treasure trove of Zobel's letters, watercolors, sketches, and prints.
It's a joy to see Fernando's work re-emerge, and a shock to me because my parents had flat files not only of Fernando's work but of other people's, and I wasn't even aware that these things were there. He's constantly inventing things, you know, in his stories and his little cartoons and then paintings and so on and so forth.
As the years passed, Fernando continued to exchange letters with Reed and Jim. Some of the letters are about day-to-day matters, but many are also about art, the subject that their friendship continued to revolve around. Dearest Jim and Reed, I still remember with delight that beautiful unfinished oil of Reed's of the view out of your window. I want one of Reed's new paintings to have in Spain. Not a very big one, since I'd have to carry it with me somehow, but how I would like to have a fragment of your vision to help me see. The precious works of art and letters found in Jim and Reed Pfeufers' estate are a testament to the enduring friendship that revolved around art and love. One elegant letter came decorated with the Chinese character for the word thought, because, Fernando wrote to Jim and Reed, I was thinking of you. In an undated letter written from Cuenca, Spain, Fernando Zobel made a point of reminding the Pfeufers of the crucial role they had played in his life. Much love to you. I think of you very often, and I like you very much indeed. You have given color to my whole life.